Hi, I'm Terrell Turner, the host of the Business Talk Library, and we are starting a new segment of the Business Talk Library, the career segment, where we're going to talk all about careers. And I want to introduce you to your host for the Business Talk Library career section, the Mr. Chris Word.
Thank you very much for that introduction. I am excited to lead this series. It's something that's very close and near and dear to my heart, I would say. I definitely have learned the bumps and bruises through my career, so I'm looking forward to being able to give that advice and just provide that good dialogue about careers.
Awesome.
Ready to go?
Yep, I'm ready to go.
All right,
here
we go. I got this. All right, so before we get started, I do want to say this. We are taping this in the middle of the coronavirus, COVID-19, and I know that a lot of people have been impacted professionally, so I do not want to overshadow that and make it seem like this was 6 months ago or a year ago when the world was normal. It is not. The focus for this series specifically and this segment is to target the students, those that are still studying in school, that are looking to understand what does the world look like and their careers look like. So we're going to give you information about accounting versus finance, part 2, and what the career path is for those different industries and fields based on 6 months ago. We don't know what it's going to look like, but we'll see where that goes. Ready to go?
I'm ready.
All right. So let's talk about accounting versus finance, the career path. So I'm always accounting. I'm always stay accounting. And he wants to be Mike Tyson, so I'm going to be Muhammad Ali. You know what I'm saying? Rumble in the jungle. All right, here we go. So when you graduate school and you have that bachelor's in accounting or that, what's the degree in finance? Help me understand.
I mean, okay.
Oh, yeah, it's accounting. That's right. So when you have that degree, what do you do? What's your first step in finance?
So for finance, it depends. If you want to go, I guess you'd say technical finance, like to go work for a bank. Okay. I mean, take an entry level job at a bank, or if you want to go, let's say corporate finance, so where you're kind of going kind of operational treasury. It varies. So what I'll say is, let's talk about corporate finance.
Okay.
So corporate finance, if finance is the route you want to go, a lot of times to start off with the term financial analyst, which I think is a common term. That would be like entry level.
Okay. So for accounting, I would say the similar role, it would be a staff accountant or accountant is generally what you're walking into. And just as Terrell mentioned, you're going into a corporate role as a staff accountant. I would say you're generally going to do journal entries, balance sheet reconciliations. You're going to scrub the numbers and make sure they're looking right. You're really going to learn the business itself, the company, and their best practices. That's really all you're going to do in your staff role. You're not going to be overseeing anyone. You're not going to be making any grand decisions. You're just going to close the books, do your entries, do your reconciliations, and then maybe some small projects. Is that similar on the finance side?
Yeah, I mean, I would say from the finance side, I mean, when you come in as an analyst, one is you're not expected to know everything. Actually, most people assume that you don't know much because you're just new to it.
Right.
I mean, you've learned the theory in school, but now, I mean, you're going to do some basic analysis where, let's say, if the company's trying to, or your department's trying to figure something out. I mean, whether you may do like a cash flow analysis, and more than likely they already have the template created. Okay. So you're really collecting the data that goes into the template. Okay. And then you're giving the results to somebody else. Okay. So you're doing kind of the, I guess you say, a little bit more data collection, some analysis, but you're really working independent with the senior or your manager to really, when you get to the analysis part of it.
Now, is this something that you should know as finance? So I'll speak about accounting. As a staff accountant, I expect you to know debits and credits. Like, I think that's what we learn in school. You got your debit, you got your credit, and it flips on the other side. It all is confusing, but I expect you to at least to be able to speak to it. I understand you may not know how it works in all the different accounts, and maybe there'll be some little confusion, but you should at least know debits and credits. What about finance?
So now, for finance, if you're going to go into, again, there's slightly different from corporate to banking. So if you go in banking, you need to know cash flow, you need to know net present value, some of your technical finance calculations. Now, on the corporate side, you need to understand, I guess, have an understanding of, net present value and cash flow, and more so how it may work in a model. So if you're creating a model and something changes, you need to kind of understand that. So now I will say this plug for accounting. It will be better.
Go ahead and say it. Go ahead and say it. They already know. Go ahead and say it.
It would be better if you actually understand, how to read a financial statement. Because you're going to have to take the pieces of the financial statement and actually make sense of it, like make some type of business sense out of it. But if you don't know how to, if you don't know what an accrual is, you don't know what an asset or a liability is, you're going to probably struggle trying to move forward in finance.
So what I'm hearing is it's, I won't say hard, but to come right out of school without any real knowledge about a financial statement, to jump right into finance, you're going to struggle a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because what a lot of companies end up doing is, and from my experience, what I've seen working with Fortune 500 companies, where people come directly out of college from finance and they start working in a business role, is I'd have to spend some time up front really actually helping them understand, how to read a financial statement. Like, let's break this down. Like, you need to understand what's in the income statement versus what's in, the balance sheet and what's in the cash flow, because you're going to need that basic knowledge to do your job in a corporate setting.
I think that is an amazing point. And if I had a little bell or a star somewhere, I would flash it right now, because I think you highlight something important. Is a lot of people go to school and they get a degree and then they're just like, I have the paper and then that's it. But there's a lot of legwork you can do in the beginning to make yourself prepared to get more ready for your first day on the job. Sounds like for finance, it's learning financial analysts, being able to understand the financial statement and even the document and what it means and how it correlates. Now, that may not be having a 10-year job before that, but at least some cursory experience will help.
I definitely agree. I mean, because, in reality, when you're looking at finance, even if you go the banking route or whatever, you're looking at elements of a business that are going to end up on some type of financial statement. Now, if you want to be able to speak intelligently about it, it's in your best interest to know, okay, I know how to calculate this valuation, or I know how to calculate this net present value, or this internal rate of return. Like, I know how to calculate these things, but how is this going to actually show up in the financial statements when, Wall Street looks at the business, or when an investor looks at it, or when you have to give an answer, like, where is that going to go into the financial statements? It's always in your best interest to know that, and that's a little more accounting, not as much finance.
That's right. I'm going to count how many times you said accounting. So now we've talked about the staff level roles or financial analyst roles, and to be perfectly blunt, it's the ground level. It's the grunt work. This is where you earn your chops. This is where you learn the business. This is where you learn the terminology. This is where you get comfortable in your field, because it's going to take you for a ride. Now, let's talk about the next step. Senior accountant, senior
analyst.
Okay.
So you'd be like a senior financial analyst, and as companies start growing, that term often gets used across accounting and finance. So I would say just whatever the senior equivalent is. And that's usually about, after you've gotten 2 years at kind of like the entry level, kind of year 3 is where people start to move into, year 3, 4 is where they move into the senior level.
So what do you expect out of a senior?
So at the senior level, definitely I would expect that you have an understanding of the financial statements, like you know what they are. And as we look at, different analysis we're doing in the business, where you're able to tell me, hey, if we just calculated, the net present value, like that's great. But then we're looking at a deal like, okay, all right, what else am I going to see change in the, in the balance sheet? Because net present value isn't a balance sheet account.
Right.
I mean, I guess say it's an analysis. It's a result of taking a couple of accounts and a couple numbers and running it through some formulas. But what's going to change actually in the business, and how am I going to actually see that show up?
That's interesting, because for the senior accountant role, at this point, I expect you to understand the journal entries. You know the month-end close process. You even know down to the days of what we should be focused on. For instance, day one revenue, day one, day two revenue, day 3 and 4 cost of goods sold or cost of service provided, and then from there it's the SG&A lines, and we kind of work our way to the balance sheet. So I expect you to know that. I also expect you to be in a position where you're ready to review a staff level's entry. The entry that they prepared, the support that they've prepared as well, even know kind of where to go and hunt, if that makes sense. If the question is asked, hey, this looks off, can we figure this out? Can you go get the support for it? You know where to go. If I ask my senior to figure something out, if I say, hey, this doesn't look right, and they ask me, well, where should I go and get it? I made the wrong decision. We got to start over, or we got to do some more work, because you're starting to move up the ladder. You're starting to have some more experience and gain that knowledge about how we do this. And so if I'm still having to teach you where and teach you how, then you're not ready for that senior role.
Oh,
Similar on this side?
Yeah, I mean, I would say similar, because, I mean, at the senior level, that's where you actually start to have a little bit more of a voice. Whether it's like when we're having, you're expected to speak up a little bit more about, hey, this analysis that you did when you looked at the numbers, hey, what jumped out to you? Hey, what kind of opportunities are you seeing? I expect you to actually contribute to the discussion as opposed to just doing background grunt work.
Right. And I would say that as a senior, you're now in the meetings. We're starting to talk about things you should be highlighting. I did this entry, it looks weird, or is this sign correct? Or, hey, this seems like it's impacting X, or it feels like this entry does Y. So the senior has a little more experience and has definitely a bigger voice. So, want to go to manager?
Yep.
We talked about senior, let's go to manager. So, Same thing, we have accounting manager, manager analyst, or?
So it'd be like a finance manager.
Finance manager. Okay, let me ask this question. What's the experience or tool that finance uses a lot and that the manager should definitely know? Is it Excel? Is it Tableau? Is it a tool?
Now, a lot of it's going to be Excel, because I mean, when you're building different models, Excel is probably your most versatile because it's easy enough to change.
Okay.
Now, if the company has already invested in a financial tool, whether that's Hyperion, whether that's Tableau, something that pulls the data from an established system, and it just allows you to configure the data. So if that company has that, then using that.
Okay.
And then a lot of companies are using tools like Salesforce. That's where your sales team is putting in all the deals that they're working on. So you got to be able to pull data out of that so you can run analysis, so you can do different stuff. So using the tools, whatever that company is using, you should have some familiarity with those.
Yeah, and I would say the same on accounting as well. You have your systems where it allows you to put the journal entry into the system, basically your general ledger or your ERP, enterprise resource platform. And that system, Oracle, Hyperion, similar to what you mentioned, Financial Force is Salesforce version of that. So that's actually what I'm using and learning now. So as a manager, from an accounting side, you have to know that thing like the back of your hand. Like you have to know your general ledger accounts, which accounts we're utilizing. You have to know your business units. You have to know how to put the entry in, because I am now looking at my accounting manager because they've made it through staff accountant. They've made it through senior accountant. So now as a manager, you should know how this whole platform works, whether you are new to the company or whether you've been with the company for years. You should know how it works. That should be week number 1 on the job. How do we close the books? Tell me everything I need to know about this system. So From an accounting side, I see that impact. How is it on the finance side?
Now, so for our finance side, once you get to the manager level, there are a bit higher expectations, because not only do I expect you to know, the technical side of finance, because you have to be able to review what the analyst did, what the senior did. You should be able to look at, financial models, and you should be able to notice when things are off, because you'll have familiarity with, key metrics or key financial statement analysis, to where you can look at those things and be like, something doesn't look right there. And also at a manager level, you should have understanding of accounting principles. Like, for example, a lot of companies are going through 606 accounting change. As a finance manager, if you're going to build financial models, you need to be able to understand that, because you need to be able to have a discussion with, let's say, the sales team, and the way that they're negotiating that deal. You should have at least enough understanding to know that, hey, that's probably going to trigger some type of special accounting. I need to go talk to the controller, or I need to go talk to the accounting manager. Like, you should know those, I guess, be dangerous enough to where when you need to have a deeper conversation about a technical accounting subject matter.
And that's an excellent point to make as well. Where's my bell? Because I say that because accounting rules change and things come up, and you have to be aware of it. So I expect my accounting manager to know about it, to be more than dangerous with it, to start even thinking through what impact is that going to have to our reports that we've presented in the past, as well as what we're going to do in the future, from a system perspective, from a team perspective, a resource perspective, even from just a general accounting perspective, and how do our operations work, and billing and payments and all of that. Like, you have to see the whole business when you start to get to the manager level. That's a great point.
Yeah, and I think that being at a manager level is where you also have to start I guess you say not start, but you should have these skills developed of being able to translate financial data to non-finance team members. So whether you're talking to someone in operations, or someone in engineering, or someone in sales, like, you should be able to translate that financial data into something that they understand, because at the manager level, your job is to help the business make good decisions.
Question for you. Good question. The variances. At what point staff, senior manager, at what level should be able to answer a variance analysis or explanation?
I would say definitely at the manager level, because at the manager level, you're pretty much, whatever part of the business, you pretty much own that. You should be able to answer, hey, if there's something off here, you should be able to have a good grasp to be able to give some good directional explanation as to why that number didn't meet the forecast, or why that's off. Now, at the senior level, at an initial senior, you're not expected to. But if you want to make it to manager, you should be able to provide explanations as to, hey, this is why the numbers are off. Because one of the common things that I've heard when working with, having seniors on a team, where, when I look at a variance analysis and they're like, revenue underperformed by 5%. And I'm like, I can do the math to figure that out. I need to know why it underperformed by 5%.
Exactly.
So a manager is a person who's thinking like that already, like, hey, what was the business impact of this variance? And I would expect the manager to be able to answer that question.
I agree with both of those. And that's one of the big frustrations that I would say you see at the senior manager, executive level, when you're looking at a variance and it says something like, oh, the journal entry was wrong. Why? It's like, don't tell me that. Like, give me the business reason as to what this happened. Was it an invoice? Did we double pay? Did we book? Like, what's going on in the business as to why this variance is happening? Don't give me just a quick level, the percentage is off. Man, I can see that. It's right next to the number. Thank you. So I definitely expect an accounting manager to be able to articulate why this variance is off. And it's either rate or quantity or some great exception like coronavirus, which you're going to see a lot coming up now. But what you're seeing is readable, it's understandable, and it helps the senior manager, it helps the executive take that knowledge and go and present to the board or whomever that person is. But if the executive has to then do research, then you didn't really do what you were supposed to do before you provided that report to them. You have to make it easy, as in like plain and simple of what this variance is. Ready for senior manager?
Yeah.
All right, let's go up the ladder. So now let's talk senior manager.
Okay.
And this is, you don't really see this a lot in every business. It's a very, I would say, high level role, and you really see it in more of your Fortune 500, Fortune 100, especially where your business is so large that you need to get the data through a lot of different fields, or you have, your business is wide and you're accumulating the data up to the top. So senior manager isn't everywhere, but you do see it pretty often depending on the size of the business that you're with. So we want to make sure we mention it in this video as to what that level is. So from an accounting perspective, I think they get pretty similar now. We'll just say senior manager, and it's not really the senior accounting manager or anything like that, but it's a senior manager. What about finance?
Yeah, so for finance, again, I mean, if you're at a bigger company, like when I was at General Electric, we had senior finance managers. Mm-hmm. I mean, when I was at, smaller tech companies, you went from manager to kind of executive mm-hmm. level. So again, if you're at a big company, usually a senior finance manager is what you'll see.
Mm-hmm. And the experience here is taking what the manager knows and does and really is able to do it across a bigger platform, to be able to accumulate the data, manage the team, set the goals, work the team, and then communicate to the upper levels of management what's going on in the business and really owning it. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and I would say, at the senior finance manager level, of course, being able to do everything that the staff can, the senior analyst, the manager, being able to review, provide oversight, mm-hmm. Having a deeper understanding of the accounting, like the accounting close process, mm-hmm. knowing what that means to the business, knowing, mm-hmm. like, for example, if you know that, hey, the accounting close process is at the end of the month, then you know that, hey, I need to talk to the operations team and tell them, hey, you guys need to get those products out of the door by XYZ date because the cutoff mm-hmm. period is right. 3 days or 2 days before. Like, you have to be able to proactively think right. about those things. And then at that senior finance manager level, my expectation for a senior finance manager and the expectation that was given to me is you should be able to walk into a room, into a meeting with a executive of another discipline, like with a sales executive, mm-hmm. and you should be able to have a intelligent conversation about the business, mm-hmm. about the sales at their level, but being able to provide insight from the finances. So mm-hmm. you should be able to be a business partner to executives mm-hmm. of other disciplines by that point.
That's an excellent point and a big role for the senior manager. You are now the leader of your business unit or department or area, being a country, a section of the country. You are speaking on behalf of that department or area to say, this is what, from an accounting side, this is what we need. This is our close process. This is how it works. Oh, we are thinking about acquiring this business. This is what it would mean from an accounting perspective. Oh, we're thinking about selling this. This is what we would need in order to process that from an accounting perspective. You are able to speak on behalf of your group from an accounting side. One thing I do want to mention also is that at that level, a lot of the other steps beneath you look to that level for support as well, support and information. I expect that each level is providing the leadership and information that you need to do the job. But when you're looking up to a senior manager level, now you need my quote unquote leverage to get other departments to do what they need to do so you can do what you need to do.
Yeah, and I would say that because even when I remember like my time as a senior finance manager, to where I'm sitting down with the executives of different departments. So let's say I'm sitting down with the director or the executive in supply chain, and we're having a discussion about, hey, what they think they're going to be able to deliver or produce. And in that discussion, like, I know, hey, the business needs to hit XYZ goal. That executive is kind of sandbagging, holding back. Like, at that level, I was expected, like, hey, you got to put a little bit of pressure on them and let them know, like, hey, I need you to deliver more. Like, you got to actually challenge a little bit more at that level. And that's not a finance skill. That's more of a, I guess you'd say, kind of a management kind of people skill. Like, you got to develop those soft skills to be able to have those tough conversations. Because at the manager level, if an executive told you something, you may accept what they said. But at that senior level, you need to actually start owning the results of the business, like feeling the pressure. Like, if we don't hit our results, then you shouldn't feel okay about that, not hitting your results. So being able to have that healthy pushback with other professionals and in a professional way, because you have to own hitting the final number that your guys are expected to.
So I'm going to draw a line in the sand, because that's a clear difference between accounting versus finance. Because finance wants you to hit the number. I need you to hit the number. Why aren't you hitting the number? You better hit the number. Otherwise, I'm going to tell so-and-so and we're going to have a problem. Accounting is like, well, they did it. They didn't do it. Based on what we see in the system, we achieved it or we didn't. It's really, we on the accounting side report what was done. So I won't say we don't take ownership. We own the business as well. We're just as much business partners as everyone else. But in order to walk in someone's office and tell them that they have to hit a number, that's not really an accounting thing, because we're more so whatever happens as of 11:59 that day is what happened that day. And it's our job to make sure that the executive team knows if they hit that number or not.
Yeah. And I think from a finance standpoint, like at that level, the type of conversations if there was a deal going on and accounting said, hey, that doesn't meet the technical accounting standards, then it's up to me to go back and say, okay, all right, what do we need to do to hit that, to make this deal work? Like, what would need to happen for us to be able to recognize this revenue? And then going back to the operating team and like, hey, these are the things we need to change, or working with the sales team. Hey, we need to change this in the contract, so we can actually hit the number to where you're actually in there pulling levers to make sure that, hey, you can legally hit the number. Now, there are some people who push the line.
I'm glad you said that, because I was over here like...
So I will say, I put that in quotes to say that, hey, it is important you legally hit the number, because there are some people who, may come to the accounting team and say, and I remember this even when I was an auditor, to where, I'd ask questions about something. They're like, well, my senior manager told me to do this or whatever. And it's just like, you guys know that's outside of the rules. That you can't do that. That's illegal.
Right.
Or like that's unethical, to where as a senior finance manager, you have to have those tough conversations and wrestle with, hey, how do we get from where we are to where we need to be ethically and legally?
Yes. I'm glad he mentioned it, because I don't have to, but that's definitely a line in the sand. Accounting cannot be involved, should not be involved, should never be involved in conversations about what lever we need to pull to make stuff work. We, in accordance with GAAP, as I mentioned in part 1, we have to record the business based on what actually happened and based on GAAP. So we can say, based on the Revenue Rule 606, this is how we have to account for revenue. Based on where we are right now, being our goal is X, this is where we stand, this is the difference. The rest of it is up to you. Like, I can't do it. That's none of me. So we have to draw that line in the sand, and I say that emphatically that is definitely a clear line between accounting and finance. But to the point, I will give finance a credit here. That's when you really get into owning the business, managing the business, and developing relationships throughout the business, rather than being an accountant and just dealing with this is what happened. As finance, you're out there making things happen ethically, legally, et cetera, et cetera. All right, so let's go executive level, because I think this is when the pyramid finally comes together, right?
I would say somewhat.
Okay.
I mean, from my perspective, from a finance at the executive level, you are almost expected to be an owner of the business, to where there have been situations where I've been in where, hey, the operations executive, look to me to be able to step in and lead the team as they would. But having the wide breadth of the finance information, just being able to step in and lead the team, let's say if they had to be out or they had to go do something else, like their team actually looks at me as a leader. Whereas at the senior finance manager role, it's like the executive respected what I brought to the table, but when you get to the executive level, not only does your team look to you to lead, but other people's team look. Like when I was working at different companies, like the sales team at that executive level, they were looking for insight and direction from me, although they didn't even report to me. Because there you really have to own guiding the business and even like looking proactively, like, hey, when something happens, it's like figuring out, hey, how do we prepare ourselves for this? Like one clear example, when I was leading a business before and one of our suppliers had a fire. So, which meant that the supplier had a fire, we weren't going to be able to get any of our parts from them, which meant we were going to potentially lose the contracts that we were in negotiations with. So now it's just like, hey, what kind of effective strategies can we come up with to keep that customer happy and still be able to keep our business? Because now we got to go tell them, hey, we're not going to be able to deliver parts for you for another 18 months, but we still want you to sign this $18 million contract.
Right.
Like, you got to be able to think at that level.
Right. And that's a good point to make on the finance side. From an accounting side, we're talking controller, we're talking CFO in some positions. The titles at this point really don't, I won't say don't matter, they matter, but depending on the size of the company you're at, they can all mean the same and do the same. So not to disregard any title, but not to also highlight anyone either, because as you mentioned, even on the accounting side, at this level, you own the numbers. You are speaking on behalf of the numbers, that they are correct when presented, that the variances are true and accurate, and that the reports are tight. So I would say from a controller position, kind of starting there, you are putting out the income statement, the balance sheet, the cash flow statement, and it's accurate and ready to go. You're managing the auditors, external, internal, and handling that whole process, which we'll talk about in another video. But at that level on the accounting side, you are owning the numbers. This is what we did. These are the journal entries we made. This is our approval process. This is how you are comfortable, meaning the controls, all of that situation. You know the whole platform and can speak to all of the risk, all of it. So where on the finance side, it sounds like you're still owning and managing the business, but on the accounting side, you are standing with your head up that these numbers that are in this document are correct because I know how my whole team operates.
Yeah, and I think also at that level, from a finance standpoint, you start to actually deal with external parties. Like at one point where I was in investor relations, where you actually have conversations with Wall Street analysts, where they're challenging you about, the valuation of your business, where you're reading their reports or even, writing the script that the CEO and the CFO are going to actually share when they get on their quarterly analyst calls, or you're actually going to customer meetings where you're having discussions with customers, or you're on the phone, calling like major suppliers, to where you're actually doing more outside the company than you ever have done at any other level in the business.
Wow, that's great. That's great. In accounting, you don't really do that. We may call a vendor to figure out why or what's going on, or why did we get this invoice, or hey, can you follow up and see, is this in accordance with the contract, is not, or can we get support for the invoice? So you're calling at that level. But when it comes to like creating business and maintaining a business relationship or developing a business, we kick that across the wall to finance and say, hey, this doesn't look right. You may want to go handle that. So I think you're still with us. I hope you're still with us. We're having a great conversation about the different career path between accounting versus finance. What I heard earlier was that in order to be great at finance, you should understand accounting. Say that again. But there are similarities with the different roles, but also clear differences, especially as you get into the leadership positions and kind of what your main focus is in the role. One thing I do want to mention is that as a leader in finance, are you expected to know and do everything that the staff or financial analyst is doing, or do you assume that they know their role?
I would say, at that level, you should be able to spot when something is off.
Okay.
Because what you do find, and which we'll probably get into another segment, where there are some people who taken like an accelerated route to where they may not have ever actually done what the staff is currently doing, but they should be able to look at the big picture to know, hey, something's off here, and then to be able to work with their team to figure out, hey, how did this thing get off, and how do we fix it?
Yes, and actually, let's talk about that briefly. The accelerated route. So if I'm imagining the corporate ladder, you have your staff, as we mentioned, you have senior, you have manager, you have senior manager, and then executive. So if I count that right, like 5 steps. But then there are ways before I go there are ways that you can accelerate that route, because that's generally between 10 to 12 years of, and maybe even longer, depending on the size of the company you're with, the size of the department you're in, the politics of the department. There's a lot that goes into how long that career path can take. But I would say at least 10 years before you're at the top level, or should be considered for the top level. But there are some ways to accelerate that. Let's talk about those.
Yeah, so some of the ways that when it comes down to accelerating is consulting can be a route. Because one of the things you look at when you do consulting, you're getting a wide range of skill sets or experiences, and you've seen different scenarios. So if you have that wide range, sometimes some companies look at that and say, well, this person has done this, this, and this. They can bring knowledge from all those things to the company, as opposed to if a person came in at the staff level, they've only seen grunt work at that level.
Correct.
So sometimes consulting can be a path, or one of the very common ones is getting involved with like a company-sponsored leadership program. Because typically a company-sponsored leadership program, that program is designed to give you the information, pretty much just to teach you how to think at the leadership level. They're grooming you to be a leader, so it allows you to move faster through that organization.
And for all the listeners, again, our target would be the students who are about to graduate or in the accounting field or looking to get in accounting and finance. That is your target. You want to be considered a rising star, or you want to be selected for a leadership development program, because that's when they basically put their hand on you and say, we see potential and we're going to show you the route to get to the top. And at that point, it's up to you to get there. And that's a great way to accelerate that.
And I will say, there are sometimes, like for myself, like when I took my first job with a Fortune 100 company, I wasn't in a leadership program. I just came in as an analyst. But based on the work that I did, the controller at the time actually recommended that I go into the leadership program, which wasn't the common route, because usually people come right out of school. So I had already had 3 to 4 years of experience, but they made an adjustment, allowed me to get into the leadership program, and it definitely accelerated my career much faster than had I just tried to just move up one role at a time.
Right, and I would say, and I took the consulting route where I consulted for 6.5 years all around the country doing a lot of different projects. And I would say by the end of it, I was like, man, I have all this information and experience. I mean, from different industries of companies to different projects as well. So when I finally came into industry, I was like, I'm ready to go. Like, give me something that's going to satisfy my craving to push through work, to get through to the goal. And it definitely accelerated my route as well.
Yeah.
What about like an expat assignment?
So that one, I think it definitely does a great accelerator. Like if you're working for a multinational company, and for me, that experience was I started off at the staff level. I went into the leadership program. At the end of my last, I guess you'd say, assignment or bonus assignment was to do an expat assignment to where you move to a new country. Now, again, and I'll say this about the accelerated path. The acceleration comes at a price. It's not like, hey, you're just gonna work a regular and live a regular 9 to 5.
Yep, good point.
You have to go where they ask you to go, or where they tell you to go.
Right.
So when you go into a leadership program, a lot of times that may require you to relocate. They may say, hey, we need you to go to this plant or this location in the middle of nowhere, and you got to do that job for 6 months. I mean, as part of that program. Now, with doing an expat assignment, again, a lot of companies that are multinational that have locations around the world. I mean, if they're sending you on an expat assignment, they're covering a lot of costs. Like, it is an expensive. It's probably like 4 to 5 times your normal salary is what it costs the company to send you. So if the company is sending you, they believe that, hey, you're worth the investment.
Right.
And if you're doing well in those assignments, what it also shows is you're flexible. One is you're willing to do what the company needs at that time to be able to relocate to another country and to live there, not only live there, but to still deliver results. Because it's not an easy thing, just moving to a whole new country by yourself. Like, it looks glamorous, but sometimes working in another country is not as fun as traveling to another country on vacation.
Right. That's a excellent point to make. But one of the things I want to highlight in what you said is flexibility. Flexibility is a huge way to accelerate your career. And that's one of the different challenges. People want to stay where they're comfortable, where they went to school or where they grew up. And there's nothing wrong with that, but there's a lot of opportunity and ways to accelerate if you are flexible. So in my example, or my history or experience, I was in Monroe, Louisiana, for 11 months, and I probably worked 100 hours a week for 11 months. Like, that's putting in work. And we worked 7 days a week. The only day we got off was Super Bowl Sunday. And that was just because we were like, we're taking the Super Bowl off. Like, this is the day we're taking off. But I learned a lot. And the person that I was working with and for, they were great. We had a great team. And at that time, I had that flexibility. I had that desire and that ambition to just grind it out. I didn't complain. I loved it, actually. And we worked and worked and worked till 2 o'clock in the morning, go to the hotel, you sleep, you wake up, you go back, you do it all over again for 11 months. But that was what we did. And like I said, I loved it. But that flexibility is a great way to accelerate your career.
Yeah, I always tell people, accelerators for things that help your career excel faster, they're great, but they come at a cost.
Yes.
They're not going to be free.
Yes.
You will have those instances where you do work these crazy hours. Now, you may have situations where, hey, a person went from, being entry level to, 6 years, they're at the executive level. But you also have to understand that there was probably a ton of late nights
they earned
throughout that 6 years for them to get to that point. And I would say it's great to get into an accelerator program, but understand it does come at a price, and it does require a lot of flexibility on your part.
Yes. And just one little soft point to make here, then we'll wrap it up, is at the end of the day, this is your career. it is your career. It is whatever you want it to be. If you are the type that wants to get in and wants to learn and wants to excel and wants to be tapped on the shoulder, job well done, then the opportunity is there, especially if you're flexible and especially if you're interested in what we mentioned before. But if you're the type to get in and just complain and be like, oh man, my boss ain't know nothing, he get on my nerves, or she frustrate me, or I'm not doing that. Oh, it's 4:59. 5 o'clock, I'm out the door, shutting down the laptop, whatever that is, then your career is going to be what you make of it. It's going to be exactly what you give out or what you put in. So at the end of the day, this is your career. You have all the opportunity to be out there. And the purpose of this video is just to give you a few tips on what that path looks like so that you can be successful as well. Wrapped up? All right. Thank you for joining. Check us out next episode. This is Business Talk Library Careers.
Thanks for tuning in to the Business Talk Library. If you like what you heard and you want to hear more, be sure to click the subscribe button and follow us on all social media platforms as the Business Talk Library.